Okay, so we have finished knitting the 6 inches of rib using our contrast color. We've done the placement here. I'm going to just scooch this over a bit so you can see it. We've done the connection here, so we get a nice smooth line. And now what we're going to do is fold this and connect this edge with this edge, so we get a nice double waistband here on the bottom of this sweater. So there's a few different ways that you could do this. It really depends on you and your style of knitting. What I'm going to do is a 3-needle bind off because I like to do the 3-needle bind off because it both binds off your live stitches and makes a seam at the same exact time. You could do this a couple other ways though. If you're not comfortable doing a 3-needle bind off, you could bind these stitches off and then hand stitch them, hand attach, or with a yarn and needle. Stitch those together using like a whip stitch or an overhand stitch right along this edge here. Or you could also, what I'm going to show you right now is I'm going to show you the 3-needle bind off that I'm planning to do. But you could also, once you pick up the stitches along here with your second needle, you could also use a Kitchener stitch to close up this join right here. A Kitchener stitch or binding these off first and then stitching them down will give you a looser, more give here. But I think if you're able to do a 3-needle bind off in a loose manner, it's going to work for you just as well. It'll be just as loose. So here's what we're going to do then. For now, we're going to ignore these stitches, these 8 stitches on my size that I'm working on right now. This is 8 stitches. It may be a little bit more on the larger sizes. But we're going to ignore these stitches out of the main fabric right here, and we have our tail. We're going to come back and do those. So the first thing that we're going to do is pick up stitches with a second needle right along here while we leave our live stitches that we just finished knitting here. You should have finished with a wrong side row so that your working yarn is over here on this side. So your working yarn should be here because we're going to start the 3-needle bind off on this side here. Okay, so let me show you how to pick up stitches. All right. So do you remember when we did, before we started these stitches, our very first row we knit with the right side and we purled one and then slipped one with the yarn in the back, which created this really nice detail here, as well as will help the sweater blouse a bit at the waistband, which is a feature of this design. What that also did was it created a really nice line for us to follow to pick up the stitches. So you can see that line right there. So you don't want to pick up here, you want to pick up here. Because that is the last row of the main fabric yarn. So, and you need to make sure whether you're going to Kitchener or 3-needle bind off, it's important that you have the same number of stitches here and here. So we want to make sure that we're picking one up for every purl and knit. And it doesn't really matter whether you purl or knit. All we want to do at this point in time is pick up a loop, a leg, so that we can create a stitch later. So we're just going to pick up a leg for every stitch. In the purl valley, that purl spot, you can really easily pick up the piece of the yarn from the main, the one that was slipped. It makes it a nice, easy pickup. You see now I've got a nice rhythm going. Oh, in terms of my needle size, I am using a slightly smaller needle than the body yarn. You want to use a pretty small needle. It's ideally you use the same size needle that you used for the ribbing. But in this case, I didn't have a second size, US size 3 or 3.25 needle, so I'm using a size 4. It should be okay, because again, I want it to be a loose bind off. Okay, so there you can see what I've got so far. So I'm going to continue all the way along the waistband, and I will show you, I'll pick up again with you when I get all these stitches picked up. So that's all you're doing at this time. Okay, just to show you again how to pick up the stitches, I have the piece folded with my live stitches down here, my wrong side edge here. I'm folding it and I'm picking up a leg, a loop in each section. So do make sure that when you're picking up in the valley of that's a purl, that you're picking up the baby suri, and on the knit valleys, that you're picking up the sock yarn that you used for the trim. So you can see that you should have, I think you can see it clearly, that you should have every other stitch, it'll be sock yarn, suri, sock yarn, suri, sock yarn, suri. That's the way it should go. And also make sure that as you're picking up in the knit valley, that you're picking up the bottom, the very last baby suri stitch that you can. You don't want to stray, you don't want your needle to stray up into, sorry, it's very blurry, but you don't want your needle to stray up into that area here. All right, so I'm just going to show you, let you watch as I do this a couple times. Just pick up a couple stitches. Okay. There you go. We're going to do that all the way across in this section, and then we'll be ready to bring these up and match them up as we do the bind off. We're done picking up all the stitches, and that wasn't that bad, was it? Just move my computer over there so I can see very well. Okay, these were not knit. Instead, we just picked up loop on loop, as you saw. Okay, now you could either do Kitchener again or 3 needle bind off. I still have my working yarn attached from when I finished knitting this row. I've got these stitches still on hold and I've put them out of the way. So now in order to do a 3 needle bind off, what we're going to do is slide those stitches down. And by doing edge for edge, these should all match up perfectly. There looks like I have a couple spots where I maybe picked up a second stitch. Actually, it looks like I just have 2 of those. So I'm going to just fix those real fast before I continue. Okay, so here's how this is going to work. We're going to do a modified 3 needle bind off. I've included the instructions on how to do that from Purl Soho. So there's a link you can follow to their website to see the typical modified 3 needle bind off. What a modified 3 needle bind off should do is create a smaller, less conspicuous join. Okay, so you start by inserting your needle knitwise into the first loop. On the front needle, you, oops, sorry, don't pull it through. Just wrap the yarn, don't pull it through. Now go into the second loop of the, or the first loop of the back needle, purlwise. Wrap your yarn around, pull that yarn through the loop, put the yarn in the back, leave that second loop on the needle, pull the yarn through the first loop, the front needle loop, and now you can push both of those off. Okay, and we're ready to make a second stitch. So we have one stitch now on our working needle, that's fine. You don't want to pull this yarn too tight. We want this part to be loose, so just leave that. Oh, and I'm using a size 5 double point needle, 3.75 millimeter double point for my working yarn, just to help me stay loose. So if you find that your bind off is too tight, you can go up to a 6 or a 7 or whatever works for you. Okay, so again, pulling it through purlwise, putting the yarn in the back, pulling that through knitwise on the second one, pushing both of those off the needle. Now we've got 2 working stitches on the working needle, and so we're going to loop one over the other. This is where looseness is important. Okay, so now I have 1 stitch again. I'm going to go through knitwise, wrap the yarn, purlwise in the back needle, wrap the yarn, pull it through, move the yarn to the back, pull it through, pull it through, push the loops off the left-hand needles. And now taking one of those needles, looping, slipping the back stitch over the front stitch, right? Again, down to 1 needle. Let me show you one more time. Through knitwise, the front needle, wrap, don't slip. Purlwise around the back one, wrap, as if to purl, pull through, move the yarn to the back, pull through the first stitch, both loops off the needle. Now you've got 2 stitches on your working needle. The back one gets slipped over the front one just as if you were doing a normal bind off. Okay, there you go, and you can see I have a little chain, and it's relatively flat. Okay, and you just continue that all the way across, and when you get to your very last stitch on your working needle, you can cut the yarn and loop it through, pull it through the loop, pull that loop tight, and you'll have finished this bind off. And I will get back on again and show you what we're going to do with these stitches from the front. Okay, just to finish up the waistband, we have now attached the entire waistband, so you can see how stretchy it is with doing it in a very loose bind off, so there'll be no problem with the stretchiness. And this is the right side, what you should have on the right side. The beauty of this yarn combination and changing from a size US size 5 3.75 millimeter needle to a 3.25 US size 3 needle and changing the weight of yarn means that we get this nice blousey effect that happens without changing the stitch count. So that's really nice. And again, like I said, it's very stretchy, so I don't think we lost any stretch doing a 3 needle bind off. Okay, and finally the tabs. You're going to finish off the tabs, that little 8 to 10 stitch tab that you have left here. You're going to do it the exact same way. Just make sure when you're picking up, let's see if I can show you. See if I can get the camera to focus. When you're picking up those stitches, you want to just make sure you're following a row. And again, you're picking up those horizontal stitches. So I've already picked up and attached but you would just make sure you're picking up this, and then the next would be this, and the next would be this. You're not picking up that. That is the exact same stitch. That's this loop up here, this upper loop, is forming the leg of the V stockinette stitch on the other side. So you just want to make sure you're picking up 8 to 10 in a row, depending on your size, stitches across, and doing the same 3 needle bind off. And you might be wondering about this little piece here. That little piece there is to insert your zipper. So we'll be using that when we're stitching down the zipper in another video. So that allows us space to fit the zipper in, and we can come back and tack that little tab down later. One last thing about the tabs, this extra piece here that you're stitching down. On one side, you'll be doing it in the exact same direction as you did this. So on this side here, it goes in the same direction. You can see my tail from having done the cast off, or the 3 needle bind off. So that's the same direction as the rib waistband. This one went in the opposite direction. We went this way, which meant that you just turned the fabric over around so that what was bottom is now top. And then you just do it in the same exact way. And I'll just show you those side by side. They look exactly the same. I mean, this one has a little bit of an edge, but this is on the inside of your garment, so it's really not going to matter. So don't stress about that. It would also be okay if you did the entire rib waistband in the other direction. It would work exactly the same with this modified 3 needle bind off that we're doing. Okay, and so for the next video, I will show you how to some tips and tricks on doing this 3 needle bind off for the cuff, for the sleeve cuff.